Hi, my name is Eric Whitcop. I'm a security CSE with Cisco, and today I'd like to talk about the REST API on the FMC, that's Firepower Management Center 6.1. The REST API was just introduced on 6.1, and there's a lot of great things we can do with it. So I wanted to walk through some of the use cases, why you might want to use it. Some examples might be that you work in a managed security provider and you're standing up FMCs quite often and you're looking to do quality assurance against them. Or maybe you're deploying lots of FMCs and you're trying to standardize your configuration. So if you could automate that without going to the GUI with a script, push policy, file policies, access control policies. That way they all have the same uniform name across all FMCs. You could bulk deploy a number of different FMCs. There's a lot of different reasons that you might want to use the REST API. If you're not familiar with what a REST API is, it's essentially a programmable interface that uses HTTP, and we're able to use certain HTTP verbs such as get, put, post, delete, and so on against particular URIs, and we can do a simple get and get a payload back, or we can put and push JSON or XML formatted text blobs and configure the endpoint with either a put or a post in that case. So the first thing we're going to do is go into the FMC and we are going to enable the REST API. So I'm going to go to configuration, REST API. Ensure that's checked and then hit save. Okay, done. At this point, we want to create a second user. This user is going to be used for the API functionality. You don't want to use the same account that you're going to use to manage it via the GUI because you can only log in one account at one time. So you can't be logged in as say admin in the GUI and then run an API script also using admin because you're going to end up kicking yourself out of the GUI in that scenario. So let's make a separate account and make it an administrator, and then we're going to use this account. I happen to call it API in this case. Okay? So now that we've enabled the REST API, now we're going to test to make sure that it's working. Everything we do, we're going to test. So at this point, we should be able to browse over to API, API-Explorer, and it has me, I have a JSession ID right now, so there we go. So now I'm just going to use API and then my password for that account. And this is the API Explorer. So now notice what I've done. This is the IP address of my FMC. I'm browsing over to my FMC that has REST API enabled, and I hit this page. And now I know that things are working, right? So now what I can do is I can navigate, and this is essentially API documentation built right into the product, telling me how to use the different URIs and which HTTP verbs I'm allowed to use, which method, if you will. Okay? So for this one, I'm only allowed to do a get. You wouldn't want to be able to do a put and change the version. That doesn't make any sense. So in this case, for this URI, the only verb available is get. Well, cool. So I hit the get, and it tells me like the structure of this particular query. It's well documented. And now what I can do is I can go over here. I can hit the get button, and I'm actually hitting the REST API portal right now, and it returns some data. Awesome. It's telling me that I'm running 610 build 330. Well, that is correct. And now I can use this information. I can use this URI, and I can pull this data from Perl or Python or whatever script I want to write, and I can maybe do it across multiple FMCs in my environment. That's the power of the REST API. I wouldn't want to have to log in to every single GUI and do this manually. Now I can do it with a script. So this is telling me how to use the URI and then which verbs are allowed. Okay? Um, what you'll see here too is this long UUID string. See this thing starting with E27, ending in 25 Foxtrot? That's a UUID for my domain. It was automatically assigned in my particular deployment, and I'm going to be using that to make it unique for me. Okay, so if you look at the documentation here, if you go to this link here, Firepower REST API Quick Start Guide version 6.1, and you can look at the different objects that we're allowed to pull from. They're all documented, and you'll see here that they put it in curly braces, domain UUID. And I've already obtained that. The API Explorer automatically populated that for me, which is really nice if you ask me. They didn't have to do that, but they did, and that's what makes all these queries work. So now I've obtained my domain UUID. Um, the next step is that we're going to want to get a token. And if we look at the documentation, it describes how to generate a token. This is an authentication token, an XAuth. So let's go to the documentation, and it's going to tell us, oh, not here, sorry. Oh, connecting with the client, sorry. Okay. This is the token-based choreography back and forth on how that works. You can look at that later. But essentially, you have to request an authentication token. Okay? And then we're going to add this header to our script, and we're going to reuse that token. So I'm going to need this URI, and this is the IP address of my FMC. So now what we're going to do is we're going to generate a token. Using the post verb, you're going to hit the proper URI, and it's going to display this information back. You're going to copy all this, and you're going to be using your XAuth. There's a refresh, the access token, and you're going to be using the domain ID, which we already have from the API Explorer, but there it is again. So we're going to be able to leverage that, and we're going to use this in our script. So now we have the information we need. Now we're going to test the API with Poster before we go to our Perl script. So let's work on that. So in Poster, we're going to double check and we're going to make sure that everything's working correctly. You'll notice something different here. I have an XAuth access token and then a UUID string. I added that by just going here, adding the name, the value, and hitting add. That's going to be in the header. That's going to authenticate my queries or my puts and posts or whatever I'm doing. And in this case, we were going to do a get, the get verb on server version. And now that I have a proper access, this access token, this should work. I got a 200 back, and that's an okay. That's a good code in HTTP. And here's all the information. I have my version, 6.1 build 330. Now maybe the format is undesirable right now. That's okay. So in Perl, we're going to chop this up, and we're going to do whatever we want with it. But now I'm able to actually hook in, and I know that I have the proper access token, and the URI works, and I have a 200 back. So now it's time to go code some Perl and have some real fun. What is amazing about this API Explorer is that I don't really have to code anything. If I go here, so again, we're going after the server version in this case. If I hit export, I have two options, Perl and Python. I love Perl personally. Not only do they give me the code, how to use the code, they even tell me how to install the cpans, which are the libraries in Perl, and it's for the Mac or the Linux. I could click to just download it and start running it on my Mac, but I'm going to use my Linux box. So what I've already done is I've copied all this, and I've pasted it into my Linux box. So I'm going to go over to my Linux box real quick, if you don't mind. And here I am, and I've already pasted all this code in. And from here, if I run it, I use the API username. So there's two argvs, argv0, argv1, and you need to supply those in the command line when you run this code. And look what we get back. Here's the information I needed. Now it's up to me to put this in an array in the, if we looked at the actual code here. Couple things to note here. Notice that it's generating a token and using the token on the fly. The reason we were playing with the token in the poster extension in the browser is to make sure the API is working and try to get you to give you some tools to be able to troubleshoot. Okay. But if we go down here too, so dollar response is my data. If I want to do a chomp, if I want to uh, put it into an array and go after element 6 and 7, let's say, and then print those out, that's all up to me at this point. But they've already given me all the code I need to be able to leverage the REST API with FMC. And that, my friends, is the REST API in Firepower Management Center 6.1. Hope you enjoy.